Okay.
Great. Yeah, I
All
see
right.
that. Okay, cool. So
Ah.
I guess first, yeah, we can get started.
Now that I've had a stroke and we can't continue.
Perfect. All right. So I guess first, I just like to thank everyone for joining our webinar. As you know, we will be discussing the topic of strategic leadership, and this is led by Dr. Ted Marra, who I can see on the screen. As you may know, if you read his bio, he is an incredibly seasoned executive with well over 4 decades of experience leading strategic and transformational projects across a wide array of organizations, from Fortune 500 to startups, nonprofits to government. He's led turnarounds, launched new businesses, helped small and mid-sized companies expand globally, and I think really is the perfect person to discuss this topic of strategic leadership with us. He is also teaching a 9-week program on strategic leadership as part of the FLEVI Executive Learning Series, and that program starts in 2 weeks on April 3rd. If you are interested after this webinar in that program, you can learn more and sign up at FLEVI.com/executive-learning, and FLEVI is spelled FLEVY.com. So this webinar should give you a pretty good introduction to what will be covered in much more depth within that 9-week program. In our webinar, this will last approximately 45 minutes. With time permitting, we will also open up the Q&A at the end. I guess as you saw, we are recording this webinar, and afterwards I'll follow up via email with a link to the recorded webinar so you can download or review as you like, maybe share with your colleagues and peers. So that's it. I guess without further ado, I'll turn things over now to Dr. Ted Marra. The floor is yours.
All right, David, thank you so much. I really appreciate your introduction, and I appreciate the opportunity to help launch the new FLEVI Executive Learning program. So it's great to be here, and thank all of you. Warm welcome to the program. So without further ado, let's begin our session today with a short introduction and overview of what's going on. You're probably wondering, well, what in the world is this strategic leadership sort of thing anyway? Well, it's something that after 44 years of wandering around the world and seeing what's going on and reading all the gurus have come up with. And it's really what I would call different from the standard leadership in a number of different ways. And I've tried to outline them here. Namely, this is what I would call an outcome-oriented form of leadership. And it's a form of leadership that doesn't focus on knowledge acquisition as the standard MBA, EMBA, or even executive development programs tend to do, but focuses more on knowledge application. So the idea here is to try to transform you slowly to that strategic leader that is using what I would call global and proprietary best practices. And when I say proprietary, these are practices that over years of experience, as Dave has alluded to already, I have developed in order to resolve problems, challenges that organizations of every description have had in some 40 countries around the world. So you will not have seen what I'm going to share with you anywhere else. So let's start with that. The other issue is that strategic leadership applies not only to individuals and becoming a more strategic member of the leadership team, but it applies also to transforming the organization to one of strategic leadership. And we're going to talk about what the outcomes are that we're looking for in order for us to be able to call an organization a strategic organization. And when I think about that, I'm thinking about organizations like Procter & Gamble, Johnson & Johnson, IBM, Google, Amazon, Apple, Tata, and a few others. Unfortunately, too few others. So with that as somewhat of a background, let's begin by taking a look at the overall domain of strategic leadership. And with that, we begin here with the leadership team. And I have a number of things in this first circle. The first one is what I call the leadership quote unquote team. And the reason I put quotes around that is that 80%, and that's probably being generous, it's probably closer to 90% or more, of leadership teams are clueless about how to be a true team. All right? And that's unfortunate because they're not being a good role model for the rest of the organization. And part of the reason for that is that they often have still their silo mentality, or if you use an assessment tool like Stuart Atkins' LIFO assessment, you'll see that many of them have as a preferred style of interaction controlling taking. They want to be the boss. They want to be the one that has the right answer and leads the organization. So there's somewhat of a control issue going on, which runs against teamwork and consensus. The next statement I have is doing the right things right. You know, it was Peter Drucker back in the 50s and 60s who said that leadership is a lot more about doing the right things for an organization than it is about doing things right. And I'm not going to get into that, although you'll be able to go to LinkedIn and find an article or two that I've written around that particular topic. What I've done is to pull from Jim Collins and his Good to Great book, where it says that, you know, we don't have to settle anymore for an either or situation. We can really stretch ourselves and be an and organization. So I combined the two and I said, let's be sure that the leadership team is doing the right things right. And when I say doing the right things, I'm saying things that are consistent with the purpose of the organization and will help us to achieve the vision of the organization. When I say do things right, I'm talking about excellence and the possibility of using excellence frameworks to help us be the best we can be. The next statement, avoiding the 7 sins of management, this goes back to my dissertation, where I was convinced that the behaviors and practices of senior executives can impact the overall performance of an organization. And as we know, leadership is as much about knowing what not to do or what to stop doing as it is about knowing what to do. The 7th most deadly sin, just for your information, is too much focus on the numbers. And too much focus on the numbers destroys teamwork and collaboration in an organization. And again, I have a blog on LinkedIn about that particular issue. If I were to select, I guess, 4 characteristics of strategic leadership, they would be the 4 that I have here. Unfortunately, we know that leadership, as it's described today, and as the books are written, and as the universities and business schools teach leadership, they all focus on characteristics. In fact, Henley Business School in the UK has some 40 characteristics of a great leader or a good leader. You know, things such as being humble, being decisive, being able to plan, and the list goes on. Then you have certain consulting organizations that are doing 360-degree mechanisms that have almost as many characteristics. I mean, so many that even Superman on a good day wouldn't be able to meet the standard. But 4 that to me stand out as being critical after 44 years of experience are creativity, being visionary, and when I say being visionary, that incorporates strategic thinking, not strategic planning, where strategic planning is much more of a routine mechanical process, but strategic thinking and intuitive approach to the business. They must also be role models. In other words, they must live the values and beliefs of the organization, and they must be inspirational. They must be able to provide the workforce with a feeling of emotional attachment to that organization, to feel as though they can accomplish more than they ever thought was possible. All right, what would be next? If we go to the next one, we come to relationship mastery. All right, what do we mean by that? Well, to put it simply, one of the keys to relationship mastery is the capability of the leadership team to be able to develop relationship strategies for their key, and when I say key, I mean strategically most important stakeholders. All right. And the way that process looks, the engine of which, by the way, is a strategic stakeholder management system, information management system right here, is identifying the key stakeholders. And those key stakeholders aren't always the ones that are providing the greatest revenue. But for example, if you take Hilton Hotels in Europe, when I worked with them, you take the diamond customers. The diamond customers represented only 5% of the total population of customers, yet they represented 45% of the profit of the organization. Alignment, 2 levels. In other words, you're never going to be able to have a successful relationship with a stakeholder organization if you don't have something in common, possibly a common view of the future, where technology is going or what technology is being developed, emerging trends or changing requirements. And also at the working relationship level, people have to be able to do business, collaborate, communicate, coordinate effectively between organizations. And then, of course, you have to understand what is being looked for from that stakeholder organization in terms of basics, things like accurate invoices, on-time invoices, those sorts of things. But know that every stakeholder has a set of wishes, very much as we did for Santa Claus. We used to put our wish list together for Santa Claus. Well, every customer has a wish list, and the only way you're going to be able to pull that out is through qualitative research, your focus groups, your in-depth interviews, things of that nature. And then lastly, the sources of value. And we're going to talk about value in more detail later, but there are 11 sources of value that organizations can tap into, but they usually only tap into 2 or 3, unfortunately, so they're missing a great opportunity. Then we must measure the impact of those strategies. We must make sure that we enhance that strategy by asking ourselves and being as honest with ourselves as possible, and that is, where in the world are we truly competitive? Where do we have our competitive advantage over the others? And where are we most vulnerable? Then we develop to execute as flawlessly as possible our strategies and improve this process over time. All right, let's take a look at the value chain, because again, all of these organizations that are in your value chain or supply chain are your stakeholders. And I remember working for a paper mill, which was part of Stora Enso, which is one of the largest paper makers in the world, based in Helsinki, Finland, and looking at their route to market. And as you can see, it's quite complicated. And I'm not even sure that this is totally exhaustive. But the fact of the matter is, you need to be able to identify these key stakeholders, certainly in your supply chain or value chain more specifically, and ask yourself which ones are really most critical from a strategic standpoint to our success as an organization. And what we have learned over time is that unless we have strategic relationship strategies established for all our key stakeholder groups, we'll never be able to reach our full potential as an organization. It's also true, and it's been found in the studies that have been done in the past, that having strong relationships with your individuals in this particular area here, your stakeholders, you will have more stability in times of turbulence. And that itself is a critical issue that you need to confront. All right, moving on. What's next? You need to have a world-class sensing system and a vital few balanced KPIs. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, the sensing system is like the whiskers of a cat. Every cat has whiskers. If the whiskers of a cat fell off and the cat had to get around, what would you notice about that cat? That cat would be a little bit wobbly. Its judgment would be impaired. And so it is with an organization that doesn't have the world's best sensing system for its particular context established. It will be in a situation where its judgment, when it comes to decisions, is impaired. The other thing is, this sensing system is critical to an organization being agile, and it's also critical to hyper decision making. And we're going to talk about both of those briefly a little bit later. Now, in my book, The Wisdom Chronicles, Competing to Win, I identified, after, again, my time on this planet and working with organizations, 5 critical issues that determined the ultimate success of an organization. And one of those was the sensing system. I'm not going to go into each of these right now, but you can take a look at those at your leisure, and you're welcome to take a look at that book as well. It's about a 3 or 4 hour read. It's quick, easy, and fun to read. Here's an example of a sensing system just for the customer component of an organization. And this was done for AT&T Universal Card Services. Actually, if you can believe this, way back in 1992 when they won the Malcolm Baldrige Award. And I think the critical issue is that this is comprehensive, it's integrated, it's a systematic approach to strategic customer relationship management, which is one component of the overall sensing system. The other element that I want to mention is that they had a customer listening post team, which was actually an element of infrastructure, which was in place and consisted of management, senior management, as well as middle management and others, that allowed for us to, or for them, I should say, to have the focus they needed in this critical area to them. And this was an area of particular importance where they're concerned. And so I always recommend to organizations that they start developing their sensing system by focusing initially on those areas which are most critical to their future success. All right. What I'm also suggesting is that what used to be our traditional balanced scorecard, where we had people and process and finance or innovation in some cases, and customer, that needs to be expanded, because what is driving competitiveness, or in the case of public sector, I would say excellence and profitable growth, and again, in the terms of public sector, I would put efficiency that adds value, these are the areas that need exploration. So I would suggest that each one of you take a look at these 9 areas that are here and ask yourself the question, how important is this now? How important will it be in the coming 18 months to 3 years to the success of our organization? And again, I point out that what we need are the vital few, okay, not the many. We're looking for few is actually more, all right? We have too many organizations that collect data for the sake of collecting data. And if a little data is good, then a lot of data is even better. And whoever dies with the most data is the winner. Well, that doesn't help you. But data is like sand. If you take a handful of sand, it isn't worth a great deal. I mean, you can fill a hole, you can put it in your children's sandbox and they can play with their little cars and trucks. You can throw it in the face of a would-be attacker. But other than that, there's not a lot of use for sand. However, if you heat that sand appropriately and maybe add a couple of other ingredients, you create something of value, something which has benefit, a beaker, a glass, something of that nature. And it's the same with data. Unless you analyze it effectively and interpret it, you have not released the value of that data effectively. All right, going on, what's next? Strategic decision making. All right, here we go. This is a fun area. Here's just a couple of quick items that we want to talk about. We have market conditions on this side, customers and competition, and technology along this side. And technology, quite frankly, is frighteningly improving with every passing day. It's increasing exponentially, and it's difficult to keep up with. But what I'm suggesting is that regardless of what industry you're in, what sector you're in, what organization or industry you are gradually shifting into this most uncomfortable box in this matrix where everything is rapidly changing from a technological standpoint and rapidly changing from a customer and competitive standpoint. And in that box, in that cell of this particular matrix, where you were able to take a nice rest down here in the safe box, okay, where everything was stable, you now can't blink your eyes because things have changed. You need faster decisions. You need more optimal decisions, all right? And optimal decisions, one critical element of optimal decisions, as you see down here, is that they have to add value to at least one or more stakeholder group. You need real-time information. Again, it goes back to that sensing system. So this is a critical issue to be aware of. I remember working at one time for a paper products company called Sunoco in Hartsville, South Carolina, and it was such a boring industry that only every 7 years they went out and talked with their customers, if you can imagine that. But that's the way they did business. The question is, where's your organization today? Okay, which cell of this matrix is it in, and how is it moving? How rapidly are things changing in your part of the world, all right? And what do we know about change? Well, we know that it's coming faster than ever. We don't have 3 years to think about the fact that things are changing. Things are changing within 12 months, within 6 months, within 3 months, and so on. So we have to be ready. We can't wait. And change, what else do we know about change aside from the fact that it's coming more often? The impact that change is having is greater than before, and we need to be prepared for that. Okay, we can't have a fragile organization. We need to have one which is robust enough and adaptable enough, because adaptation leads to survival in order to be able to survive. What do we know about decision making in organizations? Well, the sad truth is that only about 14% of them have what I would call a formal methodology for decision making. Now, I don't know if in your organization you have training, you have coaching and decision making, but you know, decision making can't be just a 50-50 proposition anymore. You can't get it right half the time and wrong half the time. You've got to do better than that. And you've got to make better decisions than you did before. Otherwise, you're not going to survive. The fact of the matter is that every decision has a cost of lost opportunity associated with it. And that lost opportunity occurs because of a number of things: slow decision making, poor execution, which we know happens in a great deal of these situations. A suboptimal decision is made as opposed to an optimal one. You don't have a process in place. And so there we have the net impact of that decision, which is far less than what we anticipated because we lost a lot of opportunity in the way. And what I found in my time is that there are some 9 factors that influence decision-making in organization. And you need to know what those are, and you need to be focused on them. We're not going to go into them right now. Hyper decision-making, making more optimal decisions faster than ever, is critical also to agility. How do I define agility? I define agility as the capability of an organization to identify, to assess, to act. And when I say act, I mean decide and execute faster and better than competition. What does a systematic approach or process to decision making look like? It looks something like this. And here we have it broken up into plan, do, measure, and improve. So we plan our decision, we decide, we execute as flawlessly as possible, we assess its impact, we review and learn what happened, whether it worked as well as we thought it was going to be, and wherever we have the opportunity to innovate, we do so that we improve this process over time. And there should be a process owner in place. What's another critical issue in this? Strategy execution and the pursuit of excellence. All right, here's strategy execution. And it really comes out of organizational alignment. And the key issue here is that while your vision and culture sit on top of everything and are influenced by those 2 critical issues, what we need to know are what are the critical success factors for achieving that vision given our cultural context. And here there are 4 critical success factors. These are the things that we need to do and do right day in and day out, or we're never going to achieve our vision. Or looking at it another way, if we screw up on any one of these, it's going to inhibit us from being able to achieve our vision. We also need to look at the functional contributions. What is product development going to be able to contribute to these critical success factors? What is marketing? What is sales? And the list goes on. But we also need to go one level deeper into those critical success factors and understand what is it that really drives our performance in those critical areas of the organization. What are those drivers of performance? And that's where we start developing our balanced scorecard. And here I have the old-fashioned balanced scorecard, which is logical, but I think is now out of date and needs to be replaced with the new generation one, which I shared with you. The rewards matrix, quite simply, is a reward system which is based on how you achieve your targets. It's not just achieving targets at any cost and leaving a trail of dead bodies behind in your zealous attempt to achieve your targets and gain the biggest bonus, but it's whether or not you did those by engaging in the proper behaviors and practices, those that are in alignment with the organization's values and beliefs. All right. Here we have the strategic leadership perception or perspective on excellence. This is the Excellence Award. and Malcolm Baldrige, or EFQM, and I've simplified it. And I should tell you, when I showed Millikan, which is a winner of the Malcolm Baldrige Award, this diagram, they were shocked. They couldn't believe that it could be simplified into this kind of a diagram. But what you have at the top, of course, is the culture, which influences everything that you do and is an enabler. It is either your biggest enabler or your biggest inhibitor of success in an organization. But what is it that leadership should be doing? They should be creating the vision of the organization, and the drivers of that are listed for you. They need to build organizational capability, and those are listed for you here. And the result should be achieved, enhanced competitiveness or excellence in the case of public sector. And you're gathering information, you're analyzing it and interpreting it all along the way. And in fact, you need to be engaging, as I point out here, in continuous fact-based improvement, creativity, and innovation. How do you release creativity in your organization? Creativity, in a moment, we'll describe as a driver of innovation, plus rapid learning and adaptation. All of those things need to be going on in order for you to be successful. All right, what else do we have? People and customer centricity, creativity, and innovation. All right, I'll just give you a quick element. This was an article that I wrote with some other very successful people in the research area. It won the European Award for Excellence in the methodological area. But the important fact is that what is it that we found drives the attitudes, the mindsets of the workforce? More than anything, it's really customer focused. Do the senior executives, the leadership team, really believe in the value of the customer, and do their actions, in fact, reflect that or not? We need to know. Employee orientation. Are employees truly the most important asset of an organization or not? And the quality process. The quality process is, do you believe in excellence? All right. Do you want to be the best you can be? If you look up this triangle to organizational performance and desired outcomes, I'm just going to mention something quickly about Vince Lombardi, and you will remember his team, the Green Bay Packers, and he said that whenever two organizations come together to do business, there are three critical questions that they need to ask. One is, can I trust you? Do you care about me? And do you believe in excellence? That is, do you want to be the best you can be, or are you just going to be mediocre? All right, and there are other results that you need as well. Here, today, we're looking at human performance excellence. And as we look at that, to a certain extent, what I'm asking here relates to William Greenleaf and his servant leadership. And it's really saying that the true purpose of senior executives is to help each of the individuals in that organization, I should say, reach their full potential. Eliminate their barriers. Let them get on with it and do the best they can do. We also know, as we said before, the culture is a significant influence on the organization, but who is it in an organization that really owns the culture? All right. Who is that? And how does it evolve? How should it evolve? But the fact of the matter is, many organizations are trapped down here in the obedience, diligence, and expertise area. And this particular area is all about managing cost, reducing cost, control, and we find that these organizations tend to be overmanaged and underled and are not terribly successful. You really need to break this barrier and get into this area where you have inspirational leadership and talent retention instead of talent defection. And this is where you get human performance excellence. You have empowered people, people who are not afraid to take their initiative. You're unlocking their creativity, which I say is the fuel to innovation. You have that feel-good feeling, that emotional attachment to the organization, and that's where you get the greatest passion, energy, and excitement in your people. Just remember the 3 E's: engage, enable, and empower. Those are the 3 which have a great impact. Okay, what else do we have in terms of your strategic customer management system? It was probably Xerox that had one of the best definitions of what a customer-focused organization is, and that simply is, in a customer-focused organization, there are only 2 positions. Either you serve the customer directly, or you serve someone who does serve the customer directly. And while I was working with SAP, their answer to customer relationship management was an information system, the CRM information system that you see me circling here. And I said, look, we really need to take a strategic approach to marketing strategic customer management systems, and that involves a great deal more than what you're talking about, aside from a customer-focused culture, which should influence the business plan and the objectives. You should have customer strategies, which are impacting that customer experience and giving the customers a wow feeling about doing business with you. And you have sensing systems, the 3 most important ones being your complaint management system, your call centers, and your customer satisfaction and loyalty measurement systems, among others. All right. And that should give you feedback, which is kept in that strategic customer relationship management system and is continuously updated as you go through time. Okay. Innovation and creativity. Creativity is the flame. Innovation is what is produced. This is how I look at it. I've created something, and again, there's a blog on LinkedIn about creativity labs. I've gone into organizations and I've said, give me your worst performing people. Give me the ones that you're ready to let go, and I'll turn them into superstars. And I created what I call laboratories for them, where I turned their creativity loose. I said, in my mind, every human being has creativity. It's just a matter of whether or not you tap into that and how you release it. And the CEO and the management committee were blown away by the ideas that those people who they were ready to sack came up with. All right. But this really takes more. You really need to have a management system for creativity and innovation. You can look at this at your leisure, but notice it's done on a plan, do, measure, improve basis, which follows the Deming improvement cycle. Are we running out of time, David? Okay, we're up to the time.
No, we have time. It seems some people have their mics off mute. If everyone can mute their mics, that's the sound you're hearing in the background.
Does everybody hear me now?
20.
I hope everyone can hear me. Do you have your mic unmuted?
If we can have everyone else mute their mics, I guess you can go through the rest of the slides. Yeah, we have time. That wasn't any sort of rush.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. In any case, this you can look at your leisure, but the fact of the matter is you need some kind of a strategic management system for creativity and innovation in your organization. This is just one example, and it's an example that I've used with a small and medium-sized enterprise initially. I developed for them, but there are a lot of things that influence it. The organizational values. Do you have creativity and innovation as an organizational value? Has it been woven into the fabric of the organization so that it's an organizational competence?
It's me.
Hey, Atwidge, could you mute yourself?
Can I mute me?
Oh no, Antwidge. I think that's where the sound is coming from. You can also mute him from your side if you see that.
All right.
Right panel.
Did you can't hear me?
Yeah, it seems fine now. Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay. We're online? Okay, good. All right. And it must be seen that creativity as well as innovation, remember, creativity is the driver of innovation. And innovation should add value, okay? It shouldn't be innovation just for the sake of innovation, right? But it needs to be viewed as a critical success factor, and the human resource systems need to be aligned with creativity and innovation. In other words, the recognition systems, the reward systems, all the various systems of the organization from a human resource standpoint should contain elements related to creativity and to innovation. All right. What is a business model? Well, here I'm going to show you the 7 key factors of a business model. I look at a business model totally different than what you have seen anywhere else. But these are, to me, the critical factors which the leadership team has to synergize. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But remember, this was one of those 5 critical factors that I had in my book that determine the success of an organization. And we're going to talk about the outcomes that we're looking for from an organization and its business model. I'm going to talk about one of these in more detail. We have the leadership team driving it and synergizing these. We have an element called Renewal, which is the seamless integration of adaptation, creativity, innovation, rapid learning, and improvement. All right, the culture we've seen, the vision, the core competencies, and the organizational competencies. The core competencies are generally the hard, more technical ones. For example, at Sony, they were miniaturization. In terms of Honda, it was their capability to build highly efficient engines. We have organizational competencies. These might be customer focus, they might be innovation, they might be agility. They are those kinds of factors that are literally woven into the fabric of the organization and its culture. Stakeholder relationships, a shared purpose. Let's talk a little bit about Renewal, and simply I'll say that again, if this is adaptation, and adaptation drives from the outside in, all right, here we're trying to anticipate wherever possible or respond with a compelling sense of urgency to changes that are taking place in our operating environment. And we're trying to be, as you see here, as creative and innovative in terms of how we deal with those changes as possible so that we can adapt. Remember, it isn't the strongest that is the winner. It is the one that is most adaptable. But Renewal strengthens and helps to evolve this wheel against various external impacts. But at the same time, internally, creativity and innovation need to be driving outward based on what we learn through this world-class sensing system. All right, so it's a combination of driving from the inside out and from the outside in. And together, this Renewal concept will keep the business model fresh, never let it go out of date. So organizations like Procter & Gamble that are 120 years old, Merck, and others that are 100 years old continue to be successful because they continue to evolve.
And then, okay, it's...
All right, is everybody on board? Here, I've given the definition of a business model. It's a unique design consisting of those critical components, which the leadership team has creatively, thoughtfully, and optimally synergized. all right,
They are not trained
to
online.
ensure the long-term consistent achievement of key outputs. And we're going to talk about those in just a second.
The way of
And it continuously evolves.
that you do for the training.
One thing I have learned
Because
is
they
that
will check
if you
when they
gave
are marked,
10 leadership teams exactly the same
to see
business components, 4 components of the organization, they would each come up with different business models. Some of them would be total failure, some of them would be successful. In other words, think of it in terms of Legos. If I gave, red Legos for culture and green Legos for renewal and so on, and I said, build an organization out of these Legos.
you should allow
Every one of them would be different. The other thing that I've learned in my time, and it's reflected in the Wisdom Chronicles,
which I saw
is that more than 90%
is big.
of the organizations which tend to underperform or fail because of a failure in leadership. You can't afford that, okay? You need to be a strategic leader, okay? You need to be on the forefront. What's my perception of value? It's one of the most important strategic concepts to evolve in the past 20 years, in my opinion. And it is the center for competitive advantage, okay? It drives competitive advantage of an organization, and it also is the center for exceptional stakeholder relationships. Its definition, a tangible or intangible benefit. Value is measured in terms of benefits, which the alternate providers or the competition are either unwilling or unable to provide. It's going to give you differentiation. And again, we've already talked briefly about the 11 sources, and nobody can hear me.
Hey, Ted, sorry about that. If Aunt Widge, I don't know if you can hear us. Can you please mute your mic on your side? We can hear you very clearly talking with your coworkers.
Yeah, sorry about that. My apologies. Okay, here is probably the most meaningful chart. It's what strategic leaders should be focusing on in terms of the outcomes for their organization. And this is different than anything that you're going to find in the literature. The leadership team, again, acting as a team, doing the right things right, and we already talked about that, first of all, builds an enduring organization, all right? One that can stand the test of change, time, and turbulence, all right? It's proactive. Another one is that it sets the standard for excellence, okay? It doesn't just complacent approach to being mediocre, but in fact, it wants to be the best that it possibly can be, and it inspires its people, as you see here, an inspired workforce, to be the best they can be, that they're enabled, engaged, empowered. There are those 3 E's again that we talked about before. It continuously produces results, which are the benchmark for their industry, possibly outside their industry. And lastly, they have an unwavering commitment to ensuring the ever-increasing value, and that value is created and delivered to all stakeholders in ever more innovative ways. You should weigh and review your organization against these 5 critical elements. Actually, there's 6 if you want to consider the leadership team as a team and whether they're doing the right things right. There are actually 7. On a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is poor and 5 is excellence, how does your organization stack up relative to these? Do you see your leadership team focusing on these critical areas? Because this is what determines a strategic organization. It's what a strategic leader does, okay, in terms of outcomes. It focuses relentlessly on achieving these outcomes through the use of global proprietary best practices. With that, I'd like to thank you and invite you to join our program. We're going to have a lot of exciting things to talk about. a lot of things that we think can do a great deal to help you and your organization to be even more successful. Dave, do you have anything that you'd like to add at this point? Can anybody hear us?
Great. Yeah. First, I thought that was incredibly informative. I hope others felt the same. I guess to add to what you were just saying, we are hosting a 9-week program on this topic of strategic planning, which starts in 2 weeks on April 3rd. And if anyone's interested in learning more, you can go to flevy.com/executive-learning.
Yes.
Yeah, and afterwards I'll follow up via email. I'll send in, I guess, folks a copy of the webinar, the copy of the recording of the webinar, along with, I guess you referenced a number of blog articles you had on your LinkedIn, so I'll send those as well.
Yes.
As well as more information about our 9-week program.
Super. And I look forward to having you involved and the opportunity to interact with you. If you do have any questions, please feel free to direct those to Dave. Dave, you can send them on to me, or they can send them directly to me. That's fine.
Yes. So right now we're at 10:53, I guess, Eastern, just a few minutes before the end of the hour. Do we want to open up to just maybe 5 minutes of questions? And once we hit the top of the hour, we can, I guess, end this session. If anyone has any questions they want to bring up immediately, we can address them now.
What did we learn? Did anybody learn anything from this?
Oh, yes.
Good. Good.
Perfect.
Is it anything
Hello,
that you
Dr.
can?
This is yesterday from Nigeria. So, I mean, one of the things I really picked up from here is that, everything rises and falls on leadership. And
Yes.
if the company is going to move forward, it takes the leader to, take critical decisions that is good for the business.
That's right. Every time they have a project, every time they take an initiative, every time they make an investment, they should ask themselves, is this going to help us to get closer to our vision? The vision is the ideal state. It's the destination that we want to reach as an organization. And if it isn't helping us, if it doesn't get us there, then we shouldn't be doing it. And it should also be aligned with our purpose. Okay, why do we exist as an organization? If it doesn't do that, and again, we shouldn't be undertaking the project or the initiative or the investment. But the leadership team has to make it happen. They have to drive it, but they have to inspire the workforce.
Great insight.
Okay,
So I'd like
Yes.
to know, would you share are you going to share the recordings or the slides after this webinar?
What am I'm going to go into detail about each of the elements that if you look at this particular set of circles that you see here and the elements that we had in it, and let me get right to the last one here. It's this one. No, it isn't that one. It's this one. I'm going to talk about each of the elements that are in this domain and some that are not, but do have an influence on the success of an organization. So if you want to know more detail and some of the key approaches, proprietary approaches, and ways of doing things that could make a difference, that program will in fact do that for you.
Yeah, and we will be sending a copy of this exact recorded webinar to everyone who's on the call right now.
Thank you.
Great.
But good questions, and appreciate that. Anything else? Any other, any wows, anything that you can see might be an opportunity for improvement in your organization? Yes or no? Any
Yes.
opportunities for improvement? Yes, I hear yeses. Okay, some yeses. All right.
Yeah, I guess most folks are still on mute.
Okay. And what we have is a situation where you, who are listening to this webinar, need to be agents of change in your organization and help to influence others in a new way of thinking about the organization. And I think you can do that. You wouldn't be listening to this, you wouldn't be wanting to learn if you didn't have the passion, if you didn't have the interest, the energy to want to do that and to make a difference in your organization. And I appreciate that. Anything else from anybody?
Not for me. I'm looking forward to the sessions in April because I'm part of the session. So I'm looking forward to that.
Terrific. All right. Glad to have you. All right.
Great. Yeah, I think that's it.
All right. Thank you all so much for attending. And please do listen to the recording. If you weren't able to hear me live, you can listen to the recording and try to get as much as you can from it. Ask yourself, what is it that I can improve in my organization as a result of this? What is it that I can do differently to make myself a more effective and more strategic leader in my own organization? If you answer those two questions alone, that will be of great value. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of
My
your day.
pleasure. My pleasure. All right.